Welcome to Utah Stories. So we received some bad news a couple days ago. The Sanctioned campground that the mayor announced with homeless coordinator Wayne Niederhauser, they have not found a partner to actually manage and run the Sanctioned campground. The 50 pods that were supposed to be in the lot at 600 South, I believe, or no, 200 South, 600 West, they can't find a partner. It's just another, piece of news in the series of bad news for the homeless. They never got the Ramada Inn opened, empty building. They gave the guy $4 million to fix it up. He was never able to do that. Unbelievable, because that Ramada Inn now stands shuttered. It's a giant facility. They used it as an overflow shelter in 2021. It's just kind of unbelievable. On the program with me today is Wendy Garvin. Thanks for joining me, Wendy.
Thank you.
So Wendy is an awesome advocate for the homeless. She did something incredibly amazing last winter. She opened up what was called the movie night at the First United Methodist Church. It was a partnership between you and the Methodist Church, where you basically just helped get people out of the cold, right?
Right. Yeah, it was a partnership between First United Methodist Church, Unsheltered Utah, which is my organization, our Unsheltered Relatives, which is Dave John, and Pandos, which is Carl Moore. So it took all of us to get that up and running, and they deserve all the credit too. They spent all the late nights and all the very early mornings.
Yeah, and it was kind of a legal loophole, because if you didn't know, the city council and the mayor passed a moratorium on building any new campgrounds or warming facilities or anything sheltering the homeless in Salt Lake City, because they felt like their burden was too much. And so there was a law that you couldn't shelter the homeless. And so you guys used this legal loophole by making a movie night. I think that was so cool. So whose brainchild was that idea?
Actually, there's a church called the Genesis Project down in Utah County, and they were doing the same thing. And so we just borrowed their idea, and we did call the city up front and said, hey, we're going to do this. We are absolutely running a shelter, but we were calling to find out if you're going to shut us down. And there was some back and forth, and basically they said, well, technically it's not a building fit for human habitation, which would mean you can't allow people to sleep there. And I said, well, technically it's a church, so you guys can't really come inside and check, can you? And that's where it sat the whole rest of the winter.
Wow. And that's just so cool, because I met a guy on the street whose name was Crash. And this guy suffered from traumatic brain injury. Mm-hmm. He can't really... I'd say articulate things very well, but he had told me he had gotten a sleeping bag, had gotten a tent, and then it was just like a free-for-all. Mm-hmm. The strong would steal from the weak. He had his sleeping bag stolen from him, his tent stolen from him. He
got stabbed. Cold. He got stabbed at the very beginning of the winter, I remember.
Yeah, horrible situation, mm-hmm. But he kept getting his things stolen. Mm-hmm. Because when you're freezing cold and it's life or death, I would assume those who are the strongest get into survival mode, just start stealing from the weak. His life was saved thanks to the movie night.
Oh, and we love him so much. He is such an amazing character.
Yeah. And just a neat guy, just carries his heart on his chest, on his shoulder, and he's just so thankful to you who are at the grassroots, actually working directly with them, just fulfilling their survival needs. And there's no shortage of need out there for that.
Crash is a great example of the type of people that we would help. There's a lot of people who access the shelter system and do just fine in it, but there's a percentage of people who live on the street who just don't do well in the shelters. They get in fights. They are, as you said, the strong tend to rule these social situations, and that's true inside the shelters as well. So the people who get beaten up, get chased out, get assaulted, they don't do well. And then there's also people with mental health issues, that maybe PTSD or some levels of psychosis, just can't do well in confined spaces. And so those people tend to choose the outdoors if they don't have a better option. And those were the folks that would show up at our door at the church knowing they couldn't survive outside those nights. And so what we tried to do was accommodate as many special needs as possible. So we would find a little room where people with a dog or people with PTSD could kind of be away from the crowd. Crash had a really rough night one night when he had a fever and was not in his right mind. And we literally sat up with him all night long while he ran through this feverish process, because he wouldn't go to the hospital, wouldn't accept any help, and was shouting at the top of his lungs. And so we just let him find a corner and just had a staff member sit with him all night long until we finally convinced him to go to the hospital. He's one of our favorites.
So, and do you guys check in on these specific people all the time who you know are going to struggle on the streets but don't want to go to a shelter traditionally?
We do, and that we've built a relationship over the last 3 years or so. So we tend to show up in our personal vehicles, and they know what our vehicle looks like, so they find us. And I can't be out on the street for more than about 10 minutes without Crash finding me and checking in. He'll check to see what I have to give out. I'll ask him how he's doing. I'll check to see what's latest in his life, because he earned the name Crash very, very honestly. I think he's broken every bone in his body, that poor kid.
Yeah. And so back to our original topic, they can't find a partner to run the sanctioned camp. You were one of the applicants. What do you think was lacking in your application?
Money. The state of Utah has a very strict rule that it will only do reimbursement contracts. And that means that you as a provider need to be able to put up several $100,000 up front to buy cots, to buy bedding, to buy food. Your employees need to get put on payroll. They need to get training. They have to be paid for all that training, and should be, rightfully so. So you have to be able to cover payroll for about a month. Then you bill the state, and it will take them some time to get back to you. So you need about 2 months of upfront money to get any sort of project like this going. And so for groups like the Road Home or Switchpoint, they have been fundraising for years. So they have $500,000 to do that sort of upfront cost. We just don't have the money for it. And so we have the experience of running the movie nights. We have the ability to staff the program. We have the knowledge and experience, but we don't have the money.
And that's the only disqualifying factor.
It is. And because this happened so fast, we've really struggled with the fundraising process, because most of the big foundations just don't have a rapid turnaround time. We've approached the bank. I'm actually attempting to mortgage my house so that I can put that money up front, because, to be fair, I trust that the state will pay me back, right? So it doesn't feel like a huge risk, but it'll cost some in fees and I don't know, interest and things like that. But then we'll have this program up and running, and we'll be able to save some lives.
Well, so when Mendenhall had this press conference with Niederhauser, Mayor Mendenhall and State Homeless Coordinator Wayne Niederhauser, and it was to so much fanfare and delight on their part. Oh, we're finally doing this. We've got the money for the pods. Mm-hmm. They're going to provide those, I suppose. Mm-hmm. They're providing the land, but they're not providing beds, and they're not providing money for training or the basic necessities, blankets, things like that.
I think that they'll end up reimbursing us for most of that, but there is no upfront money. And the city may have more flexibility, but they put all their money into purchasing pods. And so the money that's coming from the state is limited by this legislative rule that it has to be a reimbursement contract. And in conversations with the state, if they had a way to give us upfront money, I think they would. The state is very eager to get this program up and running. Mm-hmm. But there's nobody more strict than the government on their rules, right? And so they just can't. They can't do it. And so it's up to us to do some fundraising and to figure out a way to do this.
Gosh, I just find it so odd that if it were a freeway contract, you'd have the contractors lining up, and you'd have 3 in the bidding, and they would choose the winning bid. And I don't think it would be the contractor has to come up with the money to build the freeway and they get reimbursed. That just seems really odd.
I mean, it is a messy system, and I get very frustrated in dealing with all the systemic issues that we have. But we're not going to give up. We are going to bid again. I believe that I have secured a loan so that we can show that we have that upfront money that we need. And so now we just have to go through the process again. I also have reached out to everybody on Facebook that writes grants and asked for help to make sure that we put forward the very best grant we possibly can, because we don't want to be the reason that more people are going unsheltered this winter.
Yeah, and you and thanks to you and those other organizations you mentioned, no doubt saved lives. I mean, seriously, how would have Crash survived without a sleeping bag or a tent had it not been for movie night? He made that perfectly clear. I have to survive by going to the movie night.
Well, we also had people who came in and did not make it every night. And some of those people lost limbs. They got frostbite and they lost feet. We saw somebody who lost half of a hand, several people who lost fingers and toes. So there was a lot of loss last winter, even for those that we did provide services to sometimes. And we're just desperate for a way to keep those folks from having any more loss, any more suffering. Frostbite is a horrible, horrible condition.
Yeah.
Very painful. We just don't want to see that again.
We encountered a man who was getting treatment for frostbite because he was freezing, and there were hundreds of people freezing. And I just would like to engage our Christian community. We have Christian churches everywhere you look. And if more churches did what the United Methodist Church did and just say, hey, if there's homeless people freezing, let's open our doors. Let's get them in here. Let's provide them support. Mm-hmm. Why don't more congregations take that template that First United Methodist did? I mean, could that be an option where churches could just say, let's provide these services so no more people need to lose limbs and freeze to death?
Yes, it could absolutely be an option. Because what we did last year was technically illegal, we went to the legislature with our good friend, Representative Steve Elison, who is an incredibly compassionate legislator. And in HB 499, the state set forward that any private organization or religious institution could use their building for code blue services on the coldest nights of the year, and they cannot be stopped by their municipalities anymore. So last year we could have run into legal problems. Now we are protected by the legislature, and more churches could step forward and do this. And the Genesis Project down in Provo is doing it again this year. First United Methodist Church is doing it again this year in partnership with us. And we have talked to at least 2 other pastors. So we are looking into other churches. We would love to work in more locations. And I have to shout out to the Methodist, the Unitarian, the Baptist community, have been very, very generous with their time and their resources and their volunteer hours. And so we're really hopeful that we're going to find more partners within that community. Mm-hmm. And we do get lots of volunteers from the LDS Church, but they have been fairly consistent in saying that they will not use their buildings.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if Jesus were in charge, he would probably say, let's use these buildings and the heat that's in them already to keep people from dying.
Well, I will say that Jesus came to our church on a regular basis last winter. He's a tall man with long hair and was very firm that he was, in fact, Jesus. And we talked to him a lot, and we decided that almost certainly if Jesus were to show up in 2023, it would be in the basement of a church sheltering people who were homeless. And that's exactly where he would want to be. And so we figured if we were hosting him, we were doing pretty good that winter.
That's pretty cool. Well, thank you, Wendy. I wanted to show your mock-up of the Sanctioned camp real quick with the time we have left. I think that the state leaders need to have some wiggle room and realize these pods are cool. Like I think it's kind of a neat idea. I mean, I think you could also have a tent and have a heated tent. These things are like $10,000-$15,000 a piece, but just a place where people can stay safe and their things aren't stolen. I think that's all the homeless people I talk to ever say they need.
Yeah.
It's just basic safety.
I have talked to a lot of folks, both in the homeless community and the provider community, and the concern with tents is they're not secure. You can't leave your stuff safely inside a tent and go to work in the morning and expect for it to be there when you come back. Even if the police are not taking their stuff, which happens all the time, somebody else could break into their tent and steal it. So I'm very much in favor of these pods. I think the pods are really cool. I think they are the way forward. But it does increase the startup costs quite a bit, and it does really introduce delays.
Yeah, and 50 out of probably 1,000, 1,200 people. How many people need shelter this winter? In your estimation?
Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness set forth the goal of having 600 beds for the winter shelter plan. Since then, the population has increased more than they expected. So the estimate that I am working with right now is that there's about 1,000 people in the Salt Lake City area that are living on the streets. And by the end of November, I expect about 600 of them to be inside through various projects, which leaves another 400 out on the street.
That's a lot.
It is a lot.
So we got some comments. We're going to have Troy read.
Yeah, we just have one from Sean Whaley who says, FUMC rocks.
Yes, they do. We are incredibly grateful for this church because it was not without cost to them. We had a gentleman have a PTSD episode right inside our front door and kicked a big hole in their wall. The toilets clogged up and we had to have a plumber come out multiple times. 85 people is just a lot in one church. And this church just took it and kept on running. They were so generous. Their board always says yes, and how can we help? We are incredibly grateful for First United Methodist Church, and we do think that they're setting an example for all the other religious communities in the state.
Yeah, well, with 400 people we're looking at minimum 400 people who will be unsheltered as the temperatures drop, who will freeze. I mean, obviously, you need another dozen churches.
We do. And more volunteers and more funds because we have to pay for food and there's just material costs in running any sort of program. So, yeah, we have a lot of needs, but we will always find a way with a shoestring and a bunch of volunteers to get people out of the cold. We have to. It's our mission.
Nice. And how can people support you?
Unsheltered Utah has a webpage, and it has donation links on the webpage. It also has drop points. Brickyard Kennels has been an amazing partner just down the street here. 1221 East, 3300 South. You can drop sleeping bags and blankets and coats. We're in a big effort to get coats and gloves right now. Any kind of donation at all. And then watch our Facebook page and we'll post volunteer opportunities. One of the things that was most exciting about what happened after last winter, we had 400 unique individuals volunteer at the church. And then this summer, when Sandy announced that they were going to go forward with the transitional housing program, we put out a call to counter some of the negative commentary within the community. And we had probably 10 different volunteers who had actively worked at Second and Second multiple times come forward and say, we would be so happy and so proud to host this in our community. So for the first time ever, we have positive commentary on opening shelters in suburban communities now because we have people who understand, they know people on the street. It's not a hypothetical anymore. Mm-hmm. They're no longer afraid. That's humanized this population. People have just seen that there's a bunch of crash type folks out there who are lovely, wonderful, lovable people, and they just need a little hand.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
So the Brickyard Kennel, you can drop off sleeping
Material
bags,
goods,
tents,
yeah.
probably hand sanitizer. I know they like to use, and sternos, and then your website, of course, people can donate.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, Wendy Garvin, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. And we're going to take a pause, and when we come back, it's Michael Valentine, mayoral candidate, on next. So we'll see you soon. Thank you so much for watching Utah Stories and being part of our community. I really appreciate your comments, your likes, your shares, all of that stuff. Couple announcements I need to make. November 2nd, save that date. We are having a special event at Broovy Cinema Pub where we are showing 3 awesome local independent films. One is about the homeless voices, the voices of the unsheltered. We have a film about the gondola going up Little Cottonwood Canyon, how somehow it's moving forward despite nobody wanting it. And then we have a film about a young boy overcoming a speech impediment. Those 3 films will be joined by a panel discussion about homelessness, and we have an awesome panel of guests, all the people who are part of the solution to solve homelessness and the problems associated with it in downtown Salt Lake City. I strongly encourage you to go out to our website, buy a ticket for that film premiere, or become a member of Utah Stories, and we will give you a ticket with your membership. That really helps us to support our coverage, to support our local independent journalism, and to really go out and find the truth. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.